Don't you cry no more.
Good afternoon. You're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com. You know, Dan, I tell you, we obviously are accumulating a following because I'm starting to get emails. And I'm not sure what time the show airs or if we have it in rotation on the local TV channel, but I'm noticing that the emails are coming in around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Perfect.
So are you getting any of these?
Perfect. I haven't gotten any yet, but I'm excited to start using those in our show, folding them into it.
That's right. So we will take questions. We will take theme suggestions. We will take wardrobe advice. Just feel free to contact us. All right. You want to start us off? Today's theme?
Yeah, today's theme is creativity. So I took the liberty of pulling out a document that we've been using with our teachers, Bloom's Taxonomy, and Bloom's Taxonomy on its head. And just wanted to have kind of a preliminary discussion about, what is Bloom's Taxonomy. Then we'll talk about what turn it on its head means in our classrooms. And then what I'd like to do is see if there's a way that we can connect all of the topics we talk about today. This is the challenge, Chris. All the topics we talk about today need to be connected back to creativity some way, shape, or form. So let's talk about Bloom's a little bit. I think everybody that's taken any kind of education theory has had the opportunity to take a look at Bloom's. And if you remember, it looks like a pyramid. At the base, the widest part of the pyramid is knowledge, and it works its way up from remembering to understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. The theory is that there's... if you spend a lot of time in knowledge, or that's where you should be spending a lot of time, is the way Bloom's taxonomy was set up. And then a little bit less time in understanding, a little bit less time in applying, a little bit time in analyzing.
And, we've talked historically around educational models over the last 100 years. And if you think about it, even go back to the time when you were a kid and you were even doing homework, you spent most of that time trying to memorize. Remember.
So this will date me, but do you remember those yellow portfolios called Peachies that had they were yellow and they had pictures of like a football player, a basketball? It was a place where you could put all your papers when you were a kid.
We called them duotangs.
Okay, but remember inside of there they had the multiplication table, and you had to memorize multiplication so that you could just fire off. What's 2 times 2? 4. What's 3 times 7? 21.
Yep.
And so you could do those times tables, timed things. I mean, for a competitive person like myself, I loved that.
Yeah, and they even had them when we got to high school. They suddenly threw the periodic table of elements. Now, talk about something you had to memorize.
I was an athlete. I wasn't quite there. But you're right. That one was tough. That was really tough. But you're exactly right. These tables and, Peachies, multiplication tables, division, all these things that kids nowadays, I don't have to memorize that because I can pull out a phone and say periodic table, boom, there it is.
Yeah, access to it.
Right.
And we've sat at some conferences where they basically challenged us to, find all the words or the first 100 words to the Declaration of Independence, and he'll look them up online and let's see who's faster.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in just a separate story, my neighbor actually told me that some guy was actually in our neighborhood trying to sell the Encyclopedia Britannica the other day.
Really?
So,
was it on a disc or was he pulling a wagon with the books in it?
I had this big picture of him pulling a wheeled cart. So
Wow. So,
but you're right. We don't need those kind of things. So much
don't.
information is now at our fingertips.
And really, the premium is not now memorizing knowledge. The premium is being able to take that knowledge and use it in new and novel ways to solve problems. That's really what we want to get kids to doing, correct?
Right, exactly. I mean, we've moved away from, and we're drawing the picture for the listening audience on the Bloom's pyramid, but you got to remember, at the bottom, those first categories are bigger. It's the bottom of the pyramid, and we have talked how that was always mistaken for the amount of time you needed to spend in that area. Correct. And as you moved up, and you just recited them all, and you get up to the top of the pyramid where evaluate and create. Well, that peak of the pyramid is very small, and quite honestly, not spending enough time there based on the shape of the visual has led people sort of down the wrong path.
Well, I think what you really want to do is you want to get kids into those upper level thinking places like analyzing, evaluating, and creating. They still have to have the basic knowledge. Okay, so they still are going to need to know how to access that information. Maybe not necessarily memorize it, but how do I use the tools I have to get to the knowledge base I have to be able to do some of those other things. But if you really think about it, this is what we ask people to do in their job every day. I mean, you're in my job. There's some knowledge and remembering and things like that within it, so that we can have the quick recall. But at the end of the day, what we're really asked to do is analyze and create.
Right, and if we truly do understand it, we can apply it to those and analyze that evaluation piece, that creation piece, because we have it. It's what we do with it. We've moved from when did World War I start to why did World War I start? Because they can look up when.
Right.
But they have to actually be able to synthesize information to explain and justify why it began.
Right. What were the social forces? What were the major themes? Who were the major players? You probably want to throw in a couple big battles so that you understand how those influenced the outcome of the war, but you don't need to know specific dates.
No, and in fact, they can actually access it. And if they truly are able to synthesize that information, they will recall it. They will have it at their fingertips, and they will remember it because it has more meaning.
Within the context of what the situation was.
Right. It's sort of, and math is, we always get you have to memorize the math tables. You just have to memorize them. Well, if you think about anything beyond 5th grade where they've got all the times tables done and they're actually using those facts, the math facts that are the times tables, division tables, addition and subtraction, them using it and being able to recall it, it's because they're synthesizing that information in a larger scope. They're bringing it to understand something much bigger than just 4 times 5. The fact that they have 4 times 5 is great, but they're actually applying it, then they're synthesizing it, then they're evaluating a problem, and they're actually coming up with either a solution that was hopefully the intended outcome or one of their own, which would truly be creativity.
Yeah, so let's shift gears here. Actually, you pulled it right back to creativity. So the next item I have is find your high school's ACT scores. If you go on Ed News Colorado, you have an opportunity to go in there, and one of the tables that they have has ACT scores from across the state of Colorado. As you'll remember, that's a mandated test, state of Colorado. All 11th graders in our state take it. That makes us different than other states. In other states, only a portion of kids have to take it. This is one of our state-mandated tests.
And what's the test in?
It's the ACT.
For
and basically, it's
subject area?
It's reading, it's math, there's a science component.
And the max score would be?
That's a great question, but I'll tell you what our scores were.
All right.
How's that? So
maybe our producer Randy can find out what the max score of an ACT is.
I believe it's a 32. I believe it's a 32 in each one of the areas is what you can get.
He just confirmed it. Good call.
Yeah, good call. See, that was the memory piece, not the create piece. 36.
Okay.
Not so good call. So anyway, as I'm talking through this, I'm going to give you an opportunity to formulate your answer. But what you know of the ACT or the TCAP or any of our standardized testing, are they measuring creativity, number one? And number two, if not, or if so, how can we, living in the current environment we are, obviously we have to give these tests. What could we do to make them a better fit for what we're doing? So Douglas County School District, great scores. The average composite score in our district is a 21.7. Now remember, that's across all 9 high schools. That's every single 11th grader in our system takes this test. Average English score, 21.4. Average math, 21.8. Average reading, 21.5. Average science is 21.8. Let me give you the state comparable numbers. Or actually what I'm going to do is give you the 10 largest school districts by ACT performance. The average composite at the best school district, the highest scoring school district in our state was Boulder with 23.4. Ours was 21.7, so they're a couple points above us. Fort Collins came in at 22.1, and then Douglas County is third at 21.7. Below us are Cherry Creek, Jeffco, St. Vrain, Adams 12.
Below us.
So there's a number below us. Now, not a ton of points below us because from the highest till it looks like about the 5th or 6th down, the spread is like 3 points. So at 23.4 down to
relatively
20.2.
close.
That's right. That's right. So I think that tells you a little bit about what's happening in our schools. But the ACT, is there any component of that that's creativity?
Well, and you opened it up to other assessments. You're more familiar with ACT, of course. So I'll let you answer that part of it with the rebuttal. But you look at some of these tests that are very popular within not just our state, these state-mandated assessments. We have TCAP. The problem inherent in those tests, not just, well, there's probably several. We could do a separate show on it. But it's one time, it's one day, it's all that kind of stuff. But they're predominantly really low thinking tests, a lot of recall, multiple choice. There's a definite answer to most of those questions, and only one answer. Having one outcome and only having one outcome really does inhibits a student's ability to be creative. There's no real higher order going on there. They have to be able to look back in text, recall information. They have to be able to deduce somewhat for some of these. Where you might see it in like a state test, creativity, and it's very minor, is when you have a short constructed response where they're still looking for facts, but the opportunity for students to input voice within their writing is an element of creativity. Not a huge one, but it's an element of it. So it gives them, and there's longer essays for the writing prompt. Those are the only parts, as I'm recalling right now, because you kind of put me on the spot, that I can think where a student has any opportunity for creativity in those assessments.
Absolutely. But here's the challenge. I have to take the ACT or the SAT to be able to have an opportunity to go to college.
And you have to be creative in order to make it once you're out of college.
That's correct. So there has to be this balance when we start, balanced assessment system. We talked about that before. There has to be a balance between knowledge recovery, which is what these tests reflect, and the opportunity to do some other things, either things I like, things I'm good at, things that are performance-based. In order to get to a balanced assessment system, there has to be multiple levels of testing.
And I think you get into classrooms in Douglas County, for example, but I would imagine this is happening in pockets all over the nation where, students are getting the opportunities, teachers are facilitating performance tasks and assignments that allow students to really delve into their own creative outlets. They get a chance to explore how to demonstrate their learning and even control their own learning, where they want to go with it. We've talked about a few programs nationwide that, where they were doing that 3D printer and kids actually were designing their own projects. We have a high school where they do a year-long project in the senior year, and it's all based on interest, and how they present at the end is completely up to their own creativity.
And it's evaluated by business leaders in our community.
So, there are creative outlets, and I think a lot of opportunities. But when you start talking about these standardized tests, which are generally summative tests, end of semester tests, there's not a lot of creativity in anything that's kind of state prescribed.
So the challenge is for now is we have to play the game around standardized testing.
Right.
But we all recognize and know that in addition to that, we have to give kids opportunities to build portfolios.
Which is the hugest argument for a body of evidence.
And really a lot of our colleges are moving toward that as well.
Right.
The ACT and the SAT are a piece of the admissions process, but more and more there's people that are taking into account portfolios that students put together, or the writing.
It's not new, because if you look at some of these arts colleges, visual arts, performing arts, they look at portfolios. They've been doing that for decades. So it's only now that I think everybody else, all the more traditional social studies, language arts, they're actually giving students an opportunity to build those portfolios in order to have prerequisites for admission.
So again, I would like to recognize our schools for their high performance in ACT. Obviously that's providing a lot of opportunities for our students. We had 3,700 students take the ACT. The next we are the second largest number, it looks like. It looks like Denver had 3,741.
Which is amazing, because I'm looking at, this is 11th grade, and we have about 5,000 11th graders, right?
Well, every 11th grader was supposed to take the ACT, so you think that number would be pretty darn reflective of that. So 37, that'd be about right, is because, most of our graduating classes are between 400 and 500 kids. So that's probably pretty much to 100%.
And there'd be no reason that any 11th grader wouldn't take it, right?
Well, I do know that when you talk about the college and workforce readiness score on a performance framework, that you get counted down for the participation in your school around TCAP and also around this.
Perfect.
So.
All right, well, that's leading us up to our first break. You're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com.
Castle Rock Radio, the future of radio.
Welcome back to Castle Rock Radio. This is Dan. I'm here with Chris today. Our topic is creativity. I got a major curveball to throw to you, Chris. I pulled out a a story.
Are you still upset that you didn't know the total score of ACTs?
I am. I should have known that off the top, but I didn't. I couldn't Google it fast enough on my phone. So it's been a while since I've taken it. But I found a story about the Denver Public Schools, and for those of you that don't know, Denver Public Schools has a school choice module where they let people make a decision about what school they want to go to, and I think they do it system-wide at 8th grade. And, when they're going into 9th grade, and I think they also do it at 6th grade.
And they launched this last year, right?
That's right. Remember, we talked to the people about that were developing this. It really appears to be a pretty cool tool.
And parents basically get to put a prioritized choice of 1, 2, and 3, and I think they met almost everybody's needs.
I think so. We'd have to do a little research on that. Maybe we can bring that back later to, what percentage of people got their first, second, or third choice. Well, they just did a study on this about what were the factors that people took into account when they were choosing these schools. And the headline of this is Proximity Beats Ratings in the DPS School Choice. What that means when you read through this article is that it appears from the data that they collected, and I skimmed through this, so I'd have to read it a lot closer than I had a chance to do, but really what it looks like is that people are making choices about what school to attend based on the proximity. So the closeness to their work, the closeness to their house, as opposed to really digging into the rankings of the school, the things provided on SchoolView. Now, obviously, there's people that dictates their choice.
Sure.
But it looked like the majority said, you know what, I'm more interested in making sure that there's a school that's close by me than the overall performance of a school. What do you make of that?
A couple of questions. I'm thinking that this is the first year. So I think there's a comfort with having your neighborhood selection. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people that haven't had a chance to embrace the choice. I'd question whether or not Denver Public Schools had an opportunity to really market and share and showcase some of their unique programs so that parents could make a more informed decision. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's a great first step. And from what I recall from reading the early results, that there was a lot of parent satisfaction in the model. I think if you want to truly empower parents to find the best learning environment for their kid, you have to educate the parents or provide some sort of opportunity for them to be able to know of, explore, and appropriately choose the best learning environment. I know, 90,000 students in,
I believe so,
in Denver Public Schools. So I know that they do have IB. I knew that they do have some other choice programming. I don't know how well-informed parents are in order to make well-informed decisions. So that kind of would be my response.
So let me tell you what the findings were.
Okay.
So
you always do this,
Jimmy. Of the 23,150, I like numbers, 154 forms completed, half included an answer to at least one of 3 questions. Here are the findings. Fewer than a quarter of the respondents listed Denver's school performance framework, which documented student academic growth and school status, as an important factor in the choice decision. Nearly half said the most important reason for selecting a school was a location close to home, work, or family. Just under a third of parents indicated that a special program or school's focus was an important reason. And parents of Hispanic students were almost twice as likely to cite location as an important factor as parents of white students. So I think what that tells us, how can we translate that to Douglas County?
Well, I think that the one on special focuses is the one that, we're not alone. I think that choice is something that's being embraced nationwide. How we're tackling it here in Douglas County is to have levels of choice at all factors that are within our industry. Right. There should be choice for parents in terms of being able to get into whichever school they want based on all those factors. 2, there should be choices in school philosophies and programming so that there are different philosophical approaches that meet different needs of kids. And 3, there should be opportunities for staff to be able to be mobile in our environment, to work in a building that matches their own personal philosophy. As an example, a Montessori school. Now, a Montessori school really does cater to the independence of the child, allowing them to explore through manipulatives all the way through early elementary grades and up to middle school. But that's not for every teacher. Not every teacher has a philosophical belief that Montessori is the perfect way. But if you do, you should be able to transition into a program that matches it. So if you're a teacher and you want to be Montessori, you should be able to move there. That should be their choice as well, along with all those other choices. So I think when you talk choice and you embrace it, you really are personalizing education. You're making it specific to all the stakeholders.
And I think those are really great points. I think we've tried to do this, and I don't know that I necessarily knew the specifics behind this, but you know, when I was a principal in Oregon, we talked about having we had 5 schools in the community that I was in, 5 high schools, and they talked about making magnet programs at each of those schools and having that school's focus be solely that. So Sprague High School becomes the business school, and South Salem High School becomes this type of school. Well, what we came to with our communities really quickly was we have to provide a base program that every school has, and then if we wanted to go out and specialize in a specific program, that would be fine.
Like pathways.
Correct. But the bottom line was that there was people that expected, you know what, I live in this neighborhood, and my kid needs to go to that school. Whatever program you have there, that's where they're going to be. Yeah. And so it made it really a challenge to try to focus those 5 high schools around one specific thing. I think another example of that is our career and technical ed programming. Is I think we've done a really good job of looking at what is the programming that all of our kids are going to gravitate towards. You know, there's a lot of technology type programming, business type programming, family consumer studies, that virtually every kid in our system would like to have an opportunity for some of those, or at least enough to have those programs in every single high school. Then we've looked at, okay, some of the specialized programs, automotive technology, culinary arts. Those programs are more, fewer kids are really interested in those. So we've provided less opportunities at magnets. So we've tried to do a really good balance of what kids are requesting and the number of programs, either at all 9 high schools, in regions, or at one specific school.
Which I would say is being very creative on the part of the school to meet the needs of not just the community. And in that vein, let's play a little game.
And that's what I brought it back to, because I knew you'd find a way to tie it into creativity.
We're going to play this game. Dan, is it creative? Are you ready?
I'll try to be.
All right. So I'll give you a few scenarios. You tell me if it's creative and how. A preschool teacher, and we'll say they're from rural Montana, tells her 4-year-old students to dress as heroes to support her Superheroes of Kindness project, and they're supposed to go out into the community to do intentional kind deeds. Creative or not?
Well, it depends on what the kids come back dressed as, I suppose, right? I mean, I think
4-year-old Superheroes of Kindness. I'm pretty sure it's the Avengers.
That's right. I think it's a noble cause. I question how creative it is for the kids unless there's some other things attached to that.
All right, number 2. An art teacher creates video tutorials illustrating various photographic techniques, thereby encouraging students to tap into their own original ideas and invent their own design companies.
I like it. I think that's really creative, and I think that gives kids an opportunity to see a variety of techniques. I would think if you broaden it out even further than that and see if there's other ways to bring techniques in that aren't necessarily just the ones she talked about. But then I like the open-endedness of the project that she gave the kids.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you have that open-ended piece, the more you can have kids take things that they know and transition those into developing things in new situations, that's the more creative you get.
All right, last one. A physics teacher challenges his students to think up an interesting problem at the start of the class before it even begins, sometimes having to wait 10 minutes before a volunteer writes one out.
Maybe you could give them a little prompt earlier than the day of you ask them this. You know, so maybe it's I think that's
a takeaway activity or something for the next day.
But that's part of developing, understanding what the kids want to learn rather than what you want them to learn. So, you know, there's probably some good startup stuff in there around creativity.
So I just thought of a 4th one. Do you remember the movie Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
All right. So the math teacher, very arrogant, decides he's going to put a problem on the board in the hallway, and anybody who solves it, I think, gets extra credit or gets an A
Matt
or
Damon.
something. And Matt Damon, who, you know, is the custodian who's mopping the floors, solves it. So is that teacher's, you know, challenge to the class in the hallway creativity?
Well, I don't think they got the result that they wanted, obviously. You know, I think it could be construed that way. I think there's an opportunity for putting something up there and the element of challenge, the element of, you know, here's something that's really difficult that I want you to take a stab at solving. but I question whether it's driven by the teacher or driven by the kid. I think that's the other piece around creativity is the more it's driven by the teacher, the less creative it is. The more it's driven by the kid taking knowledge and putting it in new situations, that's more creative in my mind.
So let's transition before we come to the bottom of the hour and take a break here. So this is true. In Brazil, Lumiere schools are doing some pretty innovative things. I'd call them very creative. They have, for students aged 4 through 14, focused on project-based learning, but that's not the creative part. The creative part is that they no longer have teachers. They only have mentors and masters. The full-time mentors help students discover their interests and direct them. The part-time masters come in as subject matter experts, and they can be from anywhere, not just educational. The schools have specific learning expectations for students, but students are left to their own devices, figuratively and literally, to achieve in this school. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's really creative, for sure. I think it's, I'm trying to sort through all the possible issues and things that could go wrong. I guess that's
you're
the
giving
place.
Students free reign.
Right. That's where the administrator in me goes, is what could go wrong here. You know, I think that's a great option for some kids. I think they have the self-discipline to make things happen. But maybe that's not the answer. I don't know. I mean, is it nature versus nurture is really what the question is. I mean, is a kid self-directed because they choose and they get an opportunity and they're more engaged when they choose? Or is a kid that way because of structure put around them? Maybe that's the question. I know that's really deep.
I hope we get some follow-up information on this. I'll just give you some background before we go to break here. So these Lumiere schools were founded in 2003 by a guy named Ricardo Semler. He took this radical step in his own family business first. He actually gave his business to the employees, allowing them to set their own wages and work hours, and it turned out to be highly profitable.
But they had background knowledge that helped them to develop those procedures.
Well, these are adults. I mean,
that's
we're
what I'm
talking
saying.
4-year-olds in some of these
That's
classes.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that there was people with background knowledge and knew how to run businesses or been involved in that or seen that.
It's more of a testament of his hiring than anything else, I think.
Correct.
All right, you're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com. Welcome back. You're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com. Hey, Dan, let me throw a couple of things at you. So they surveyed some European teachers on whether or not they believe creativity is a fundamental skill that should be developed in school. So the question was, should we be teaching creativity? 95% of European teachers said yes. All right. Here's the other side of that, though. 50% say that it can't be assessed. We should teach it, but we can't assess it. I don't know if that's true. I mean, we're making a lot of headway in terms of enabling students to demonstrate creativity, which in itself is an assessment.
I agree with that. I think you give kids opportunities to demonstrate their creativity, and therefore, if they have to demonstrate it, you have to have a way to assess it. I mean, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, you see what they do. You know, I mean, think of the most elementary example of creativity. I'm a kid in a wood shop class, and I'm given 5 pieces of wood and asked to create something. Yep. There's a product at the end that I have.
Yeah.
Right?
Or any report that we were ever given when we were in high school, if we were given an open-ended way of demonstrating our learning, we would have been creative in that process. You know, I would direct people, you know, that really do want to see comprehensive rubrics on assessing creativity to look at the EdLeader 21 websites. They have it spelled out, and we've taken that, and they have it for like ages or grades 3, 4, I think it's 6, 7, 10, 11, something like that. Well, we've actually filled in the pieces. So you can actually contact one of us if you were really interested in taking a look at.
Well, and I think truly our best teachers give kids opportunity for creativity because they understand that cements learning.
Yeah.
That shows a kid's knowledge base, their application. It shows all those things of what we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah. And I'll give you one little follow-up to that, just as an online resources. People that are interested in this should check out the Innovative Projects and Lessons areas under the Tools for Teachers tab at EdTech teacher.org. There are creative activities and assignments that teachers have used and are using in all disciplines that foster creativity in everything, including intriguing online projects that students have submitted and they've uploaded. So if you really wanted to have a chance to say, let me give you an example because I thought this was just fascinating. So the assignment was a day in the life of a hobo, all right? And it ended up to be a podcast. Students researched homelessness among teenagers in the Great Depression, then they fashioned their own day in the life story, and they actually did it in a 1930-style radio show. Then they created the podcast and uploaded it.
Wow.
I mean, can you not measure creativity right there?
Well, I would think that compared to a kid that turns in a 5-page report on what it's like to be a hobo.
They cut and pasted it from a Google
search. There's some
search?
huge elements of creativity that go into that.
Absolutely.
It sure looks like it.
All right.
All right, so I have a story here regarding a New York substitute teacher allegedly scamming tutoring program, okay? A New York City...
So should I say that's creative right off the bat?
It could be creative
Illegal.
without ethics, is what I noted. A New York City substitute teacher is accused of running a scam through a tutoring service that between 2005 and 2012 bilked the government for millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of which the U.S. attorney claims are fraudulent. Charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud. If convicted, face up to 25 years in prison. Basically what he was doing, recruited teachers and former students to collect signatures from students at school and extracurricular events. And for the Test Quest tutoring company, a New York Post reports, quoting court papers, he falsified attendance sheets, allowing the company to claim more federal funding than it was eligible for. I think you already said it.
Yeah.
Very, very creative.
Very,
huge
very
lack
illegal.
of ethical behavior.
Yeah. I mean, which, we talk about the 4 C's. Creativity is certainly one of them. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking skills. And then we kind of talk about 21st century skills, resiliency, having a financial awareness, health and wellness. I mean, the list goes on. Ethics is one of those.
Right.
You can't, it's like taking educated risks. This was not an educated risk. This was not being creative within the parameters of legal boundaries.
Correct.
It's funny, but it's also sad.
25 years in prison for doing this. That's what this person faces. Got another one. No. This one's going to go with the resiliency piece that you just mentioned. Here's the question: does adversity foster creativity? Okay. I don't know if you've been following this, but the Wyoming Schools Chief Hill, State Superintendent of Public Instruction Cindy Hill. I don't know if you've been following this, but recently there was a law that was passed, signed by the governor, Senate File 104, in which it dramatically stripped much of the elected school superintendent power and created the governor-appointed Wyoming Department of Education director position. So this lady was the superintendent of instruction for Wyoming. She had really broad powers. And basically the legislature came in and made a law that stripped her of a lot of the things that she was able to do as the state superintendent. Okay? So she's currently in that job, but she said, woke up the morning after a restless night after they passed this law, and she decided that she wants to run for governor. So she's going to become a candidate for the governor in the state of Wyoming. Obviously, with the background in education, and being in a position where, number one, she'd have an opportunity to work directly with the legislatures that stripped the power from her.
Yep.
But number two, according to their own deal that they created, she would have an opportunity to appoint the Wyoming Department of Education director that would have the power to do what she wanted to do in schools. How creative is that?
I found a similar story, and I'll take it back to another movie reference in a minute, but it takes me back to, the state of Indiana. They had a commissioner of education who was making a lot of changes, and there was a teacher who disagreed with it.
That's right.
So she decided, because it's an elected position, to this past November run against him and beat him.
That's right. I saw that.
So now he is the commissioner of education in Florida, and she is the commissioner of education in Indiana.
We're going to have to definitely track this and see what happens.
I'd like to know.
What an interesting twist.
That you started with, does adversity kind of enable creativity
Foster.
or foster?
Yeah, foster creativity.
Well, you take it back to Apollo 13.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that scene where they come in and they throw the stuff on the table.
Yes, this is what we've got to work with, and we got to bring our boys home.
Right. I use that all the time when in talking with staffs about what we have to do. It's just a great visual.
Yeah. So that would be my other response to fostering.
This is going to be really interesting to watch this one, though. Very, very interesting.
When is the election? Is it
Well,
November?
I'm assuming it's next November.
All right. Well, we'll probably still be on the air.
Hopefully.
All right. I want to talk about a couple of things. I was reading an example, and I should credit the author of this since we're talking about it. His name's Eric Booth, and this was in one of our trade journals. But it was around at what age can you start fostering some of this creativity? What's reasonable? Now, you've been in all levels, right? You were in elementary, middle, and high. You've seen the gamut of sort of child development, and we're in buildings all the time. So one of the essential skills a teacher can have in sort of fostering creativity in their students is asking great questions. The question is, at what age, generally, do you think students are then able, if we facilitated it appropriately, are students able to ask good questions?
Well, I think that, one of the things that we've seen demonstrated time after time is that school actually has the opposite effect of fostering creativity on students.
Yeah.
So they're reportedly at their optimal creative level when they come into our schools as a kindergarten first grader. I love that ad on television where the guy's sitting at the table with the 4 kids around him, and he says, "Hey, have you ever seen anybody do 2 things at once?" And the kid starts waving his hand. And have you seen that ad?
Yes.
Have you seen that ad where the guy says, "Wait, this is amazing"?
Sandy's seen it.
You have to see this. I mean, there's an example of a kid taking something that someone says and transforming that into, yeah, I've seen that. And not only have I seen that, but I can do that. So your specific question around when can kids start asking questions about creativity, it's when can we understand their questions about creativity.
Right.
Because I think kids ask great questions about things in general. I mean, think about your own kids when they were little. Dad, why is that person doing that? Sometimes at really inappropriate times.
Well, and the other one, I suppose, is the one that starts, what if?
Right.
I mean, kids ask what if questions forever to the point of nauseum, and we tell them to shut down.
So the challenge is how can we build our system so that kids get to continue to ask those questions?
Here's the other one, at what age? We got a couple of minutes before to go to our next break. At what age is it... are we able as teachers to facilitate comfort in taking risk and failing to learn?
Same kind of scenario in my mind.
I agree.
I just hearken back to when I was an elementary PE teacher. Some of the kids that were the least afraid to do things because they, number one, they weren't doing the play with other kids. I mean, and we all know this research studies about girls play together, boys play parallel. There'll be 2 boys doing something, same task. They won't play with each other. They're playing with trucks.
Right.
Whereas the girls will interact. But I think the notion is that kids aren't afraid to fail when they come into our system. We developed the system for them to be afraid to fail.
The old system, because there had to be a right answer.
That's right. There had to be a right answer. You had to raise your hand. If you didn't get the question right, it wasn't, hey, nice try. It was, nope, that's not right.
Yeah.
So how can we continue to do things in our schools? Our best teachers do this right now, where they try and foster that sense of failure is better than being successful in many cases.
I absolutely agree. You couldn't have finished on a better note. We're going to go to our last break and come back and finish it up. You're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com.
Welcome back. And welcome back to Castle Rock Radio. I'm Dan. He's Chris. Today we're going to bring this home with talking about creativity. We've been spending the whole hour on this. We've had a lot of great discussions. Thank you for joining us.
I can't think of anything more creative than our next topic.
That's right. As we talked about last time, the bill tracker on Ed News Colorado, there's 44 education bills. We took a look at a few of them last week. Want to go down through the lens of creativity again.
All right.
And have you look at a couple of these. So here's House Bill 13-1040, para, highest average salary. Current law averages the 3 highest annual salaries of a member of the para when calculating that member's retirement benefit amount. The bill increases the number of highest annual salaries used to 7 for anyone who's not a member, inactive member, or a retiree as of December 31st, 2013. Any creativity in there?
Do you know, the para is the retirement for educators, public employees. Excuse me. So a few years ago, there was a worry about solvency and being able to be tapped out of cash at a certain, 20 years down the future, and they needed to look at a longer view of it. And they came up with a solution. They were very creative, and all the projections are returning very well. I think it's time to stop being creative with this legislation and I think the bill was just termed one, let one work and move forward with it. So they were already creative. I don't think we need any more creativity around retirement.
So why would you do 7 years instead of 3?
Well, what it will do is, your salary increases over time. So this bill is directed to lower the payout when you retire because a 7-year average is going to be lower than your highest 5 years.
Okay.
So
let's see. House Bill 13-1094. Tax credit for school-related expenditures. You remember last time we talked about the college credit one for the textbooks. This bill creates an income tax credit for income tax years commencing on or after January 1st, allows a taxpayer who is the parent or guardian of a dependent child to claim a credit for costs incurred for school fees or school supplies in that income tax year. The amount of the credit allowed is 25% of the total expenditure or $500, whichever is less.
Yeah, that's creative. I mean, it's certainly in a down economy, a helpful family contribution.
I think the other good thing about this is it's a reality that there's student fees that our parents and students incur at all of our schools. I mean, I know that that's consistent in other districts around us, that there's just things that we have to ask parents to help us pay for. And so I think this is a good solution to trying to put money back in their pockets or at least give them a credit for that, so I think this is very creative and an opportunity for parents to recoup a little bit.
And I think it's safe to say, and we're on air right now, so you're going to have to jump in, but isn't it safe to say that we recognize that fees are something that has come about because of financial shortcomings to provide the education in the district? And as we grow back, it's certainly in our interest to work with families to reduce fees as best we can.
Well, I can tell you yesterday, Dr. Fagan walking by my office says, we're going to get together, Dan, and talk about the fee structure and what we can reduce for this next year now that things are looking better for our schools.
There you go, it's out.
And I'm excited to do that because I do think that's one of the first places we need to go is I understand the whole notion of why you would do that, but I also understand the whole notion of why you wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
So I think that's good.
You got any more?
I got one more. Under current law, electrical and plumbing inspectors of school buildings.
Oh, you're playing to my expertise.
I am. House Bill 13-1133. Electrical and plumbing inspectors of school buildings must be performed by state inspectors even though the school building is located in a town, city, or county that has a building department that inspects the buildings.
Wow, that's a creative way for job security to
The
be
bill
created.
removes this requirement, allowing local departments to perform electrical and plumbing inspections of school buildings within their jurisdictions.
All right, so it was a creative way to guarantee state employees had work.
Correct.
Now it's a more creative way to, send out these responsibilities to the local and maybe empower local agencies to complete these.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I also think they probably don't have the number of state employees to make sure those inspections get done on a timely basis. I mean, in our district with building schools all the time, when we were doing that, that was one of the huge
It's a creative compromise. I mean, it has to be done. It's for the safety and welfare of the buildings and therefore the students and the staff. So,
but let's be honest, I brought it in because I know plumbing is one of your passions.
Yes. Thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, we got about 5 minutes, so let's see if we can get some quick hits in here. Jump in as you see fit. Here's a fun fact for you. 70% of employees in U.S. companies now work in open floor plans.
Wow.
No longer do they have private workspaces. 70% of employees in the U.S. work in an open space. That space that they used to have, those cubicles,
right,
have shrunk from 500 square feet in the 70s to about 200 square feet as recently as 2 years ago. So you got to think. This is one of the 4 C's. We've been talking creativity, but not far down the road is collaboration. You've got to have these skills in the new workplace if you're going to survive.
Right. Just think about what's happened over at Wilcox with what we've done with our
Oh,
floor.
the ad building,
how
sure.
how we've created different spaces for our team to work together.
Yep. All right, here's app of the week. It's called Math Duel, and it's everything the name implies.
Math Duel.
Math Duel.
All right.
So imagine we have an iPad between us, and it's the portrait version, and half the screen is facing me, and half the screen is facing you, and we're working on the same iPad, and we are competing to solve complex math programs.
Excellent.
Game theory. Now, of course, it's aligned to the core, because everything has to be aligned to the Common Core these days. And it does have different levels. You actually can start at simple.
So I can do addition and subtraction and
Yes.
take you to calculus?
And you can customize it to do very high-level, complex problem sets.
Right.
So, app of the week, you will have to pay for that one. That's
Math
the only
Duel.
downside.
I'm gonna have to test that out.
Yeah. I
Sounds
wonder if
like
it
my
comes
kind of
with-
game.
I'd like it to come with like a little soundtrack, you know.
Oh, you sunk my battleship.
All right, so let's talk some numbers of teachers' worth. This was, I got to turn back because I want to get this guy's name right. So his name is James Merrill, and he is a superintendent, and his local government was taking money away because they didn't see a value to the education that his district was providing. So he actually hired an economist to come in and determine the district's worth and an economic value to the community.
Wow.
So this is what they found. Now, well, this article didn't get into it, but I don't know the complexity of economist way of calculating this, but this was his recommendation. One teacher, if a student has just one teacher who is considered to be ranked in the top 15% of teachers nationwide, if in their experience in school get one teacher, right, can add more than $20,000 to the student's earnings.
Wow.
So, all right, we've only got 2 minutes. I better be faster. All right, so if the least effective, like 5 to 7% of teachers were replaced with average teachers, the achievement would reach that of Canada or Finland.
Do you think he mirrored that with the? Do you remember the stuff that Marzano did a few years back?
Yeah.
Around where they talked about the type of teacher or the expertise of the teacher a student has, how much it accelerates or decelerates their trajectory across 12 years.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very similar, or validates it at least.
So he took that fact one step further. He said over the lifetime of those students that now were the low-end teachers were replaced with average teachers, it would add to the U.S. economy $112 trillion. That's not a typo. $112 trillion.
And that, my friend, is exactly why we have to ensure that we have the best quality teacher that we can have in every single classroom for every single one of our kids.
So they actually came back to close the story off. They actually came back and they gave them the money, and then they've calculated over from 2007 to 2010 that property values, this was Virginia Beach, have gone up somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion, directly related to schools.
Right.
So, and the graduating class represents a lifetime reduction in public health and law enforcement costs somewhere around $270 million.
So what they were really scared of was that he was going to go back in and justify the value of them. And so they said, we're going to give the guy the money so he leaves us be.
Yeah, don't send the economists our way.
That's right.
All right, and that takes us to the end of another great show. We're happy you joined us. You're listening to EdNation with Dan and Chris on Castle Rock Radio.
Keep those emails coming.
.com.
That's right.